Hey everybody, so this is kind of a random video, but it's just one that I wanted to do after talking with some friends and some people online, and just the whole world really is just really confused about this whole movie theaters versus Universal Pictures ordeal that's going on, and there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of just unknown information that a lot of people don't have, and they're, making comments about one side or the other when they really don't know everything that's going on. So I kind of just wanted to shed light on the full story of what's going on there, because there's a lot that you may not know. So, without further ado, here we go. So here's one sort of misinformation thing that's kind of out there. People are saying that AMC theaters and now Regal theaters have banned Universal movies from their theaters, like forever. No, that's not really what happened. They're not even technically banned, which I'll get to in a minute. And also, people think the reason for this extreme action is because of Trolls World Tour being released on VOD rather than movie theaters. That's not why this whole action has been taking place. Did it upset them? Yes, but that's not what had them pull the trigger with their public statements. Here's kind of where it all started. It did kind of start with, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic that's going on right now did cause movie theaters to shut down. And while a lot of big budget movies and big marketing budgets were able to push their release dates, there were some movies that, had already spent all their marketing money, didn't think the movie was going to do that well theatrically, and were kind of worried, just like, well, what should we do with this movie? So understandably, some of them decided to release on VOD. But why did Trolls World Tour upset movie theaters more than, say, Scoob? Because Warner Brothers and Scoob did the exact same thing, except no one's really mad at them. So what's the difference? What happened there? Well, there's an organization called NATO. No, not the NATO that you're thinking of. I'm talking about the National Association of Theater Owners. And basically, they're kind of like above the movie theaters, and that all the movie theaters kind of report to these guys, and they're almost kind of the middlemen between the movie distribution studios like Universal, Warner Brothers, Disney, all of them, and the movie theaters themselves, like AMC, Regal, Cinemark, all that stuff. You have NATO. And these guys just really kind of help the movie theaters kind of stay up, and they're kind of like parents. I'll call them like the parents of the movie theaters. The studios, NATO, and the movie theaters are all in negotiation with each other all the time. And for decades, they've always had this one rule. And the rule is there's a 90-day theatrical window. What that means is, if you decide to put your movie in our theaters, we'll have the movie in the theater for 90 days. We can keep it past that if we want to, or you can pull it before that if you want, but we promise you that we will keep it for at least 90 days. But all we ask is, in those 90 days, don't make it available anywhere else. Like, don't put it on VOD, Blu-ray, don't do that. Because just give us these 90 days to kind of make a profit for ourselves. It's been that way for decades. And then NATO, a spokesperson for NATO, his name is John Fithian, he's the one of the chiefs of the National Association of Theater Owners, was in an interview recently, and he gave this statement when asked about, hey, are you guys upset that movies are being released on VOD rather than theatrically? Now, I'm not going to do the full quote because it's like a whole story. They were talking about how he understands about how movies have to, make choices in this unprecedented time and do all this, and even mentioned that they were cool. They were contacted by studios that were going to do this. But then, at the end of the quote, he added this: only Universal and only on Trolls did one studio skip the theatrical model and go straight to home. Universal continues to advertise to consumers that Trolls will be released simultaneously to theaters and the home on April 10th. And they're lying to the consumers. Universal knows that theaters will still be closed on April 10th. So unlike every other distributor who must simply delay their releases in that time period, but still understand the theatrical release is essential to the business model, Universal on Trolls didn't make that decision. Exhibitors will not forget this. So that was kind of a warning shot. That was just kind of like, hey guys, why didn't you just tell us what was going on? Eventually after this, Scoob, as I mentioned, did reach out to NATO and the movie theaters and sort of work out that deal, which is why there's no really backlash towards them. Universal just, without contacting them, just came out and said, hey, we're going to release Trolls on VOD, and did it. And, I work at a movie theater, so when I tell you that the theater did their part on the promotional materials for Trolls, we had a new Trolls merchandise thing every day, and I got to the point where it was annoying. So yes, the theaters held up their end of the bargain with Trolls. So while the movie theaters and NATO were pissed off that Universal made that move, it was just kind of like, that's upsetting, but whatever. We're in a weird, unprecedented time. It's fine. whatever. Just, we're going to keep going business as usual. Let's just focus on getting the theaters reopened. Well, then Trolls World Tour did come out, and Universal did a little PR spin on how it did. I say PR spin, I'll tell you what I mean in a second. But the CEO of Universal, NBC Universal, Jeff Shell, made the following statement. The results for Trolls World Tour have exceeded our expectations and demonstrated the viability of PVOD. As soon as theaters reopen, we expect to release movies on both formats. And that is when every other studio and every movie theater chain and NATO all simultaneously said,
"Oh, now you f***ed up! Now you f***ed up! Now you f***ed up! You have f***ed up now!"
Basically, what had happened is the CEO of NBC Universal came out and publicly said that they are not going to commit to the 90-day theatrical window that's been a part of the deal with NATO and the movie theaters for decades. It's kind of like that one thing, like when you have Thanksgiving dinner and you have that one weird uncle or aunt that's an alcoholic, but like no one talks about it because it's Thanksgiving dinner. Like you don't bring up the fact that you're going to break the theatrical window. Like you don't. It's the one thing you can't like do to NATO in the movie theaters is like mention that you're going to do that. And he just straight up publicly said, we plan on doing that. At least that's how the quote was being interpreted. And that's when AMC theaters got, understandably, really upset. AMC theaters was the first movie theater chain to speak up about it. But NATO has also, and Cineworld, the people who own Regal, have gone out and said something also. But this is the quote that AMC had in response to that. They said, I'm trimming it down, but part of the quote is, going forward, AMC will not license any Universal movies in any of our 1,000 theaters globally on these terms. So when I said that the movies aren't outright banned, that's still the case. That's just AMC publicly reminding Universal, like, you do remember the deal. Like, if you don't go with our 90-day theatrical window, we're not going to show the movies. Like, that's what kind of AMC was kind of publicly negotiating, kind of just being like, no, you're not going to release them at the same time on theaters and VOD. You're going to follow the window. And on those terms, if you do that, if you keep those terms of what you just said, we're not going to show your movies. And so understandably, headlines and things got twisted that like, oh, because of Trolls World Tour, AMC won't show their movies, so that's still not necessarily the case as I laid out. But it gets more interesting. You'd think after that Universal would respond or even say something like, hey, we misspoke, or the quote's being misinterpreted, we just want to say we're still going to commit to the theatrical window, because AMC is the number one theater chain in the world, and while Universal has a lot of money, they only have like 14% market share, so not having your movies in the largest theater chain in the world is going to hit you financially. Universal responded, but it wasn't a very good one. They responded, we look forward to having additional private conversations with our exhibiting partners, but are disappointed by the seemingly coordinated attempt from AMC and NATO to confuse our position and our actions. Yeah.
Now you have f***ed up!
So then on the, heights of all this, Cineworld, the parent company who owns Regal and many cinemas over in the UK, also chimed in about the whole debacle, and this is what they had to say. Universal unilaterally chose to break our understanding and did so at the height of the COVID-19 crisis when our businesses are closed. More than 35,000 employees are at home when we did not have a clear date for reopening our cinemas. So basically, they were just like, not only did they comment that they're not going to follow the theatrical window, but they did it when we have no data and stuff to defend ourselves. And they later on go on to say that, if you follow the theatrical window, of course we're still going to show your movies, but if you don't, then we won't do it. And Universal has now come out saying, okay, it's going to be on a movie-by-movie basis. Like, there are some movies that we're going to release only to theaters and follow the window, and some that we won't. And what Universal's kind of not realizing it is no, you don't get it both ways. That's not how it's going to be. Now, there are movies from Universal, from Disney, from every company that their only goal in distribution was to go straight to VOD, but that's clearly communicated to the theaters. And as long as that communication is steady ahead of time, and there is no intent for theatrical release and no funny business there, then, the Universal movies are going to be able to continue to be shown. And what I predict, this isn't going to last forever. Like I said, this is like a public negotiation that's going on. Here's what you're going to see. You're either going to see Cinemark and other major movie theater chains come out and say the same thing of hey, if you don't honor the window, we're not going to show you. Or Universal's going to get ahead of that, come out and say, hey, we want to take back our statements a little bit. what we wanted to say is there are some movies that we're going to be putting more movies on VOD than normal, but the movies that we do put in theaters, we're going to commit to the 90-day theatrical release, and then all of this is going to go away. That's what I'm hoping happens, and it probably will happen eventually. Because if you try to just release Fast and Furious 9 or James Bond on just VOD, you're going to lose a lot of money. And that's also what I wanted to circle back to Trolls 2, because Universal's PR spin on Trolls 2 is like, oh, look at how successful we were. But really, when you look at the numbers, it's not all that successful. Scott Mendelson, who writes for Forbes, put out an excellent article kind of breaking down the profiting of Trolls on VOD versus like Trolls in movie theaters. And something that should be pointed out, when Universal released the numbers saying, oh, we had over like 100 million purchases for VOD, and it's like, well, there's still an 20% keep of the people that are streaming it. So really, you got $77 million. So the movie made $77 million on a budget of $95 million, plus all the marketing costs that they did for theaters. Where they are in success, though, is they had a $25 million deal with Hulu to stream the movie on Hulu after it's done on PVOD, which means they got another $25 million on top of the $77 million. But considering the marketing costs, it's still not enough to break even. They're probably losing $40 to $50 million on this movie. And in theaters, could they have lost more? Maybe. But they said this is successful compared to Trolls 1. But what they're not telling you about Trolls 1 is they're only comparing the domestic theater numbers to the worldwide PVOD numbers of Trolls 2. If you take the worldwide numbers of Trolls 1, that movie made a little bit over $300 million globally. And it was a huge... well, not a huge, but it was a financial success for the studio. That's why they made a second one. So the number comparison is a little bit unfair there to begin with. But something, ironically, that Scott Mendelson was incorrect on, and I love Scott Mendelson, but he was incorrect in his Forbes article because he mentioned the 80 to 20 split between the studio and the streamers. But he said, I think that they think it's better compared to the 50-50 split between theaters. And it's like, 50-50 split between theaters? If theaters were getting 50% of the box office, we wouldn't be struggling in debt and struggling to reopen. Movie theaters do not keep 50% of the box office. So let me also clarify how the movie theaters work and how much they keep at the box office. So basically, when a movie first opens up, the studios get a big majority of the box office. Movie theaters get a little bit. And the longer a movie is in theaters, it goes like this. Even famously, when The Phantom Menace came out in '99, Lucasfilm only agreed to show it in theaters. That let Lucasfilm keep 100% of the opening weekend. Theaters got 0 of the opening weekend, and then it slowly got more the longer movies in theaters. That's why if there's a surprise hit, movie theaters will keep it for like 5 months sometimes, because the longer movies in theaters, the more percentage of the ticket prices they get to keep. And if you ever wondered why a popcorn and soda costs like $25, it's because it's the only way for movie theaters to make money, because roughly, when you look at the numbers, it's not 50-50. It is roughly about 33%, about 1/3 of the overall ticket sales for any movie go to the movie theaters at the end of the day when it's all said and done. So considering streaming takes only 10% less than the movie theaters, and, I can pay $20 for the movie and invite 10 friends over to watch it, so instead of each person paying for the PVOD, I have 10 watching it for the price of one. Overall, this isn't a great long-term solution, and movie theaters need the studios, and the studios need the movie theaters. That's why NATO is there. That's why that whole 90-day relationship exists. So basically, at the end of all of this, Universal has to maintain the 90-day theatrical window. And there's a reason that why more and more movie theaters are coming out and defending AMC, and not studios coming out and defending Universal, because the other studios know that they respect the 90-day theatrical window. So pretty much just mistakes happen, things happen. Universal is an amazing movie studio. They produce amazing movies. They have for decades. And, eventually this is going to all be over. But I just kind of wanted to make this video to clarify exactly the situation and everything that's going on. And with that being said, I hope I informed people. And if you have any questions, comment below, and I will do my best to answer them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.